there when you come back. Everybody take a breath. So have you ever been faced with starting something new, like a new project, or you have an idea, and you stop yourself from doing it by saying, I don't know how? Yeah. And if you're like me, sometimes you'd rather not do something, even if it's calling to you deeply, because you don't want to look foolish or silly. And so you use that excuse, I don't know how, in an effort to save face, right? And yet the truth is that when we are in the process of growing, not knowing how is where we're supposed to be. Because not knowing how leads to, guess what? Knowing how. Right? I love this quote by Thomas Zass. It says, every act of conscious learning requires the willingness to suffer an injury to one's self-esteem. That is why young children, before they are aware of their own self-importance, learn so easily. They don't care. They don't care if they look silly. They don't care if people are laughing because they're in the process of learning and they're just open. There's this wonderful story about, it's probably taking place in Fun Day School right now. So the children are all told to be drawing a picture, right? And so this one little girl, she is intent on drawing this picture. You can just see her tongue kind of hanging out. She's just concentrating so much. And the teacher comes up to her and he says, honey, what is it that you're drawing? And the little girl says, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the teacher says, well, you know that we don't really know what God looks like. And she says, they will when I'm done. Right? So I invite you to think back to a time when you started something and you felt absolutely foolish and you felt self-conscious, only to find that when you got over yourself and really embraced the learning, not only did your confidence grow, but your self grew as well. Here's how Ernest Holmes put it. He says, there is an inner urge in our minds to grow, to expand, to break down the barriers of our previous limitations, and to ever widen our experience. This persistent urge is a divine influence, an irresistible force, and constitutes the greatest impulse in human experience. In other words, for every new experience, for every new project, for every new idea, for every new, I'm going to jump in even though I don't know how, is intended to evolve us, to help us to grow. It's part of why we are here in life school. We are in life school right now. So let me tell you how this topic came up. Y'all may not know this, but I'm sure most ministers do this. We keep a list of possible talk topics, right? It can be anything from quotes I've heard to stories that people have told me to something that happened in class. You know, if you've taken class with me all the time, I'm like, ooh, that would make a good talk topic. So I'm always doing this. I get these 3 a.m. insights and I write it down. So I was looking for some inspiration this week and I started looking at my list and I came across this quote. If you know how, it's not big enough. If you know how, it's not big enough. I don't know who said it. I don't know where I heard it. I just know that when I saw it on my list, it kind of hit me between the eyes because, I'm really reluctant to tell you all this, but I'm going to. So, I've kind of sort of been resting on my laurels recently. I've been taking it kind of easy. crazy in the stretch and grow department. Hey, it's summer, right? Don't we blame everything on summer? In the past several years, I've gone through a lot of learning experiences, some on purpose and some by default. For instance, a couple of years ago, I took yoga teacher training. Now, you may look at someone like me and go, really? Yes, I did. Yoga teacher training. Because people like me can do yoga, okay? It's 200 hours of this. And not only are you learning the poses and you're learning how to teach the poses, but you're also going into this deeply spiritual yogic philosophy. So I really stretched in more ways than one. I also wrote a book, published a book called Giving God a Good Time, past couple of years. I have taught countless Science of Mind classes, just brought through 6 wonderful practitioners. I bought a house, I sold a house, and probably most profoundly, I moved to Canada, midlife, okay? So the truth is, I kind of felt like I deserved a little bit of a break from consistently challenging myself. But that isn't how the universe works. Because the universe is constantly evolving and changing and expanding. And because we are part of the universe, then our purpose in life is to evolve and grow and expand. There's nothing wrong with resting every once in a while. I want to stress that also. You know, rest and rejuvenation is also part of life. It's just after a while, it's time to grow again. It's time to take on something that we don't know how to do and learn how to do it. Ernest Holmes said, "It seems that man exists for the purpose of self-expression. There appears to be no other reason or excuse for his being. The infinite has already implanted within man an instinctive intuition, which is the spiritual knowledge of good, and his whole growth results from an inner awakening." In other words, grow we will. So the question is, do we going to do the growth on purpose, consciously, or are we going to do it kicking and screaming? So I could continue to tell you all the different ways that I have didn't know how to do something and then learned how. For instance, I didn't know how to publish a book until I did it. I didn't know how to teach yoga until I did it. I didn't know how to immigrate to a foreign country until I did it. But I wanted to share a story instead of telling one about myself. I wanted to tell a story about someone who walked through the I don't know how story, that fear, to take on one of the greatest learning experiences of her life. This person had been getting the inner urge to begin studying for the ministry. And the idea absolutely terrified her because she didn't know how. And yet the more we talked and the more we discussed what the possibilities were, the more excited she became about it. And I told her, of course she doesn't know how to be a minister yet because she hasn't done it. She hasn't started on that learning path yet. And yet what I know about learning is that once you step onto the path, your learning begins. You begin to understand. It's kind of like what they say in the 12-step program, more will be revealed. Now I want to say this is not to say that there's something or someone that's withholding information from us. That's ridiculous. There's no guy up in the sky that's doling out. Come on. You know, God isn't up there going, okay, well, I guess you've suffered enough. Here's some information. It doesn't work like that, right? It's just that when we move forward, more is revealed. As we rise up, we can see more. As we grow, we expand our field of vision and of knowledge. And what's so very interesting about this is that when we keep moving forward, the universe does indeed show up to help and to reveal more of what we need to know. This woman was fighting the urge to enter into ministry because she didn't know how. And she was like, it's too expensive, and I don't know where I would go, and I don't know how to do it. So the ways and the means were not available to her. She couldn't see them. She had no field of vision for that. However, as soon as she opened up to that idea really, rather than go, no, okay, opened up to it, she received word that a new ministerial class was opening up, that was close to her home, that was affordable, and was easier for her to do than she ever had imagined. In other words, when more was revealed to her when she was ready to see it. Now, some people might chalk that up to coincidence. Oh, yeah, well, the class was going to open anyway. Oh, yeah, that's not. The fact is, she didn't know about this viable option that was available to her until she made a decision to do something that she didn't know how to do. Is this making sense? Yeah. Okay, it's making sense to me, okay. And in my mind, it absolutely supports the idea that the universe responds to us when we respond to it. There's something called the law of correspondence. It goes like this. Henry David Thoreau, perhaps you've heard of him, is very famous for this following quote. It's kind of a long one, but it's too good to pass up. And Ty, this is the full quote that we were looking for the other day. If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him, or the old laws be expanded and interpreted in his favor in a more liberal sense. And he will live with the license of a higher order of being. Oh my God. I could do a whole talk just about that. In fact, I will. I'm going to put it on my list. But what he is saying, for today's purposes, is that when we move forward on an idea or a project or an experiment that is calling to us, that is pulling, tapping on the walls of our heart, even when we don't know how, we will be supported in learning how, because it's the way the universe works. It's the way growth works. Because again, if you don't know how, it's not big enough. Oh, excuse me, if you do know how, if you do know how, it's not big enough. So, as I said earlier, learning new things can be kind of intimidating. People, you're afraid of looking foolish or being silly or anything like this. So when I teach something new, like a Science of Mind class or something like that, I use a visual method of learning that explains what happens when we're faced with something new. And once people understand what this process is, it helps to diminish the fear and uncertainty because you understand that it's all part of the natural process of learning. So the first one is, where you start out, you are in unconscious incompetence. You don't know, and you don't know that you don't know. You're ignorant about something, but you don't know that you're ignorant. It isn't in your sphere of awareness. You understand what I'm talking about? The analogy that I like to use is when you're driving. You know, when you're a little kid You don't think about driving, right? Your parents are going to take you wherever you need to go. You are blissfully ignorant about the mechanics of driving, and you don't care. Okay? Then, you come to conscious incompetence. You become aware of something, and you also become aware that you don't know how to do it. You may want to do it, but you don't know how. So going back to my driving analogy, this is like when you're in your early teens, right? And you realize that pretty soon you're going to be able to drive. And your whole world is about to open up, but you don't have a clue how to do it. You are painfully conscious of your incompetence. Remember your first day in driver's training? Okay, yeah. But then you take your driver's training, or you start in a class, or you do something like this, and you become conscious competence. Conscious competence. This is where you are actually beginning the process of learning. And while you are learning, you pay attention to absolutely everything, because it isn't natural for you yet. You still have to focus. You still have to be aware of everything. Remember when you're driving, hands at 2 and 10, right? 10 and 2. Yeah, that. You turn your blinker on. You make sure your mirror is just right. You keep your eye on the speedometer. You are consciously competent. But it isn't second nature to you yet. You are consciously doing it. Yes? Okay? But then comes the day when you are unconsciously competent. Unconscious. This is that place where you simply know. You know how to do the thing. This is true for most of us who are experienced drivers. Come on, be honest with me. How many of you actually remember driving here today? Okay, the 2 over there. And I even had to take a different route because my route was blocked. But you know what? We just get in our cars and drive. We don't have to consciously think about what we're doing. We just know. We have become unconsciously competent. However, if we only choose to do the things that we are unconsciously competent in, we've stopped growing. We've stopped learning. In some ways, we've stopped living. Ernest Holmes said, "There is an irresistible, universal, and divine urge within us to be happy, to be whole, and to express the fullness of life. The latent divinity within us stirs our imagination, and because of its insistent demand, impels and compels our growth. It is back of every invention. It proclaims itself through every creative endeavor." So as I announced earlier today, we have really exciting opportunities for you going on. Big opportunities for you to learn more about spirituality, to learn more about God or the divine or whatever you want to call it, and learn more about this teaching and this philosophy, which is very, very deep. But most importantly, you have the opportunity to learn more about yourself through our Science of Mind classes. Now, both Reverend Marjorie and I are teaching brand new classes to us, classes we've never taught before. And the truth is, we don't know how. I mean, we know how to teach. Okay, come on, we are unconsciously competent at teaching. We've been doing this a really long time, but we don't know this curriculum. We don't know these lessons. We don't know what it is that we're going to be called on to teach. Reverend Marjorie's using a brand new book that neither one of us have ever read before. It's new. It's a little bit scary. But when the universe wants to expand and wants to know itself more about itself, it can only do it through us and as us. Because we've been around a little while, we know enough to listen when we're getting that urge. When it's saying, it's time to grow, it's time to learn, it's time to do more. So we bit the bullet this summer when we discussed it and decided we were going to do it. We were going to teach and take on teaching new classes. So I'm going to ask you please to enter into us with this new adventure. And we will grow through it together. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy the air is clear again. And so it is.